Joined today by Kellie Floyd. Welcome.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you here. So our kind of overall theme for our conversation today is going to be the move from corporate to freelance. But within that, there's lots of other things that I want to talk about, not least of which a focus on travel writing that you're doing at the moment, which one of my favourite subjects. So very interested to get into that. But before we get to the kind of the freelance part of it, the majority of your career to date has been more in the corporate world, agency, and then client side. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of that and what you've been doing?
Thank you. So if I start with university, I did a Bachelor of Social Science, and originally I was going to do my major in both media and psychology, really loving the idea of understanding what makes people tick and so forth.
Yeah.
And then it was probably in about second year, because I wanted to get into PR at that stage, I realized that I actually probably needed to do some type of business course and also probably marketing, which I now look back at, and I'm quite surprised at all of the career counseling I had. When I said I wanted to get into PR, no one actually sort of mentions that. So I moved across and ended up majoring also in marketing. And part of my degree, I also took time off and did a program called industry-based learning. So I do believe a lot of universities still offer that, and definitely recommend it to anybody that it's available for. And essentially it's where you take 6 to 12 months out of your university degree and you go and you work full-time in the industry that you're wanting to be in. And then you earn essentially 2/3 of a graduate wage because you're 2/3 of the way through your university degree. And I went and did that as a media relations officer in a public relations department for a local council. And that gave me an incredible portfolio. And of course, it gave me the press releases, newspaper articles, speeches for the mayor, radio scripts. But I think the bigger thing for me was the understanding of how to work within a corporate environment and how to be part of a team. And even as little things like what you do in a whip, and you take a notebook to a whip, which I didn't actually realize you do when I first joined. So all of those little things gave me that little step up when I then did actually graduate. One of the things I will mention is that that was an incredible 6 months. And at the end of my time there, I did what I suppose you would call an exit interview with my boss. And I suppose amongst all the other things that he said and all the wonderful things and suggested I do this and that, one thing that he did say was that he would never employ anyone that hadn't done a writing course at university, so an actual writing degree. And that threw me quite a bit, in that it was still public relations, but obviously it was writing. And I didn't quite understand why he'd then gone to our university that didn't actually offer a writing degree as such. So that, in a way, as a 20-year-old, really threw me in terms of what I thought I wanted to do. And I just wanted to keep that in the back here, because I will sort of bring it up later on in our discussions. But I went off and finished my degree, and I ended up in account management and really thought I found my calling. I absolutely loved both the building the relationships with the clients and then also with our team also out there in the field. So I did that for a number of years. Then caught the travel. I don't know if I caught the travel bug. I probably already had the travel bug, but the travel bug was certainly calling me to head overseas. So I went and did the typical backpacker thing in London and worked there in a marketing and sales role, again in a local council once again. And while I was over there, I had always thought I wanted to do a master's in writing, nothing to do with what my boss at the local council had said, but something that I always wanted to do from a creativity point of view. And funnily enough, I always thought I would do it as a 40-year-old when I had kids. Now I'm 40 and I have kids. So I'm basically now saying that this is what I used to think old was. But I suppose that time away for me, I started to realize, why do I have to wait till I'm 40? Why do I have to wait till I'm old? Why do I have to wait until I've already built up some type of career to actually go and do something that I really want to do just for me? So I came back and I ended up applying to do my master's in writing, and of course got in. So I ended up doing that part-time, and then also went back into account management in a part-time capacity, which was an incredible time in my life. It was one that I really enjoyed doing. And then I suppose with any job, you want to continue to be challenged and you want to continue to grow. So I moved across into another sales and marketing agency as an account director. And this was a organization or an agency that I really loved. I loved their values. I loved the team. And I really at the time thought that I could spend the rest of my career here. I saw the trajectory. I knew where I wanted to go in terms of climbing that corporate ladder. And also I think in terms of the teams that I worked with, I was managing the second highest revenue client for the business, managing a team of 45 across Australia and New Zealand. So for me, there was a huge amount of joy from both that client building relationship from that perspective, building up a team, mentoring younger account managers and coordinators as well. That was something that I really felt quite passionate about. Got to go overseas on management development programs and things like that. So there was a whole lot of things in that particular agency that I really loved. And then I had a child. So this is where sort of things start to change a little bit. And I went back into that role after my parental leave, but wanted to be only part-time. Then tried to suggest the part-time, the job sharing type roles. And unfortunately, it just wasn't seen as something that could be done. And I suppose it was before that flexible work type situation really became apparent here in Australia, but it just wasn't something that was able to be achieved. So I went back to the agency in that part-time capacity, but only working with a different set of clients. Still great, still loved it. They were, I suppose, brought in less money to the organisation, so there was less of an importance, I think, put on them across the whole agency. But I was okay knowing I was also going to go away and have another child, which I did. And then I took 2 years off with my second child, and really, I suppose that's when I started to see a lot of change in terms of what I wanted to do moving forward career-wise. So I did go back to that agency again, but this time round, the roles that I had previously been in weren't available. So I went into their direct sales department. And at the time, it was really pitched as a great thing because there wasn't anybody else within that agency that had worked across each department. And I, by that stage, had gone across all of them. But I very quickly discovered that direct sales was not for me. And as much as there was still client nurturing and relationship building, because it was all derived from a call center, it was very much about those quick sales. So from a customer perspective, even that, there was no real nurturing the way that I had worked previously with staff in the past. And I also think that there were, there's the values of an organization, there's values of individuals. And I think within that department, there were some issues there. And I really struggled with not having that connectedness and everyone sort of being on that same page. The other thing I think that a lot of people talk about is when you are part-time, you're often still working those full-time hours. So for me, that was something that I was very heavily doing. And I think part of it is also, for me personally, was not wanting to show people that I was a parent and I had other priorities. I still had my own career aspirations. I still wanted to climb that ladder. I just wanted to climb it in a different way, but I didn't want to kind of let that on at that stage. So I worked very hard, as I said, working practically full time. And a lot of those hours were done at nighttime after 7 p.m. because I wanted to be present in the day when my kids were awake. So I very quickly got burnt out. I got very sick, kind of just cold and flu type things, but just basically was never, never healthy. And then it got to a point where my son was about to start primary school. And for me, I couldn't bear the thought of not being at the school gate. So there are many parents that, don't have that opportunity or don't want to be there, which is totally fine. But for me, I was really starting to grapple with what do I want to do for this next little bit. And I wanted to be there at the school gate when I in the mornings and also in the afternoons. So I resigned from that role, and that was a really tough decision for me. It was very teary. I cried a lot on that last day, and a lot of people were saying, well, why are you leaving if you love it so much? But it wasn't working from an overall perspective for me. And as I said, it was the real first time that I started to grapple with, well, I still want to this for me in terms of my career, but I desperately also want to be there and want to do this with my family as well. So I stepped away and decided I was going to freelance for a while. And I very quickly started working with a member association, which then very quickly actually ran into being a permanent part-time position. And there I had a boss that was incredibly I suppose, ahead of her time. I essentially said I will work a couple of days a week. I'll be in the office one day every fortnight. And she didn't even bat her eyelids at that. It was completely fine. So over time, those hours did increase on my terms. I wanted to increase them and certainly be in the office more. But for that first initial stage, that was an incredible opportunity, that there was that trust, initially, that I could still do this role before the working from home thing really kicked in. So I was with them for a number of years, and as the head of marketing and communications, and really built up that function. And it's something that I'm quite proud of. And of course, with everything, I still want to continue to be challenged. I still wanted to grow. And it got to a point where I felt that there was probably not much else other movement within that association for me. So I jumped across into a for-purpose management consultancy, and they had never had a marketer internally. They'd always outsourced to that. So I was then sort of tasked with that role of building up that function. Funnily enough, they say that you never go back to a previous role. And there was an opportunity for me to go back into that member association when some things were changing. And at the time, I felt that that was a great opportunity for me to head back and really put my own stamp, I suppose, on some of the aspects of that association. For various reasons, job changes, personnel changes, things didn't quite work out. But I think for me, even with me going back, I always had in my head that I didn't really give that freelancing thing a real good go. And I also desperately wanted to write more, which is, I suppose, where this travel writing comes into it as well. So throughout those years from when my son started primary school, I did have the sort of the side hustle, as we call it, and would do a number of bits and pieces, sort of not necessarily ad hoc. So I did have some clients that were fairly permanent and would do things every month, but it was never, it was always sort of very side hustle-y. It wasn't too many hours every month. So probably about this time last year, I started thinking that perhaps it's time for me to kind of take that leap and just go, where's freelancing going to take me? And not even putting any goals on it. So I think I'll probably find that there are a number of people that may not agree with the way I've done this. But the last time when I first started my ABN, when my son was in prep, I had the website, I had the business cards, like who has business cards? I had the branding done. I knew my values. I knew my vision. I had all of the things that you would almost say were tick box type things that you need to do when you're starting a business. And I did none of that this time around. So I just went, I'm resigning. I'm going to just see where the world takes me. I'm not putting any revenue targets. I'm not even saying I'm going to freelance for the rest of my life. If a particular job comes up that I like in the corporate world, I'm going to jump at it. But let's just see, where the world takes me, really, and let's give it a go. So I jumped back in about October last year. So almost sort of coming up to the year, and very quickly I became very busy very quickly, and certainly unexpectedly, because I hadn't done any of that promotion and saying that I was out there, in that freelancing capacity. So I've worked for a number of organizations, which have been amazing, and a couple of member associations in the health industry as well, disability support service organizations, travel, so in terms of property or travel property companies as well, and doing a whole lot of things. So anything from working on unique value propositions and then translating all that into the communication strategy in terms of both internal and external stakeholders, web development, web copy, social media strategy, running white papers. It's been quite a broad sort of things that I've been doing, really. And of course, then there's my travel writing or lifestyle writing as well. So part of me going freelance was also to give me more space without it kind of having to be at nighttime or on the weekends, to just give the travel writing a go and start pitching a lot more. And it's been fun and quite successful, really.
Very cool. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? The idea of just kind of, I think you used the term leap of faith, of just kind of jumping off the cliff. And having done it myself, it absolutely feels like that. It does feel like jumping off the cliff. But I actually think there's a lot to be said for doing it in that way. And as you said, not putting too much pressure on yourself, not having too many, I don't know, it's the terminology of parameters, boundaries, goals even, but just kind of trusting it and just kind of jumping and going, I don't necessarily know how this is going to turn out, but it's going to turn out the way it's going to turn out, and I'm okay with that. I actually think there's quite a lot to be said for that approach.
Yeah. And I think the whole, one of the big sayings is, navigating your career. And if I, probably got $1 for every time I even use that terminology in the member association I worked for, in my own communications, I'd be a millionaire. But I almost think that navigating is almost the wrong terminology as well, because if I think of, I'm not a sailor in any shape or form. I don't, spend any time on boats or ships, or, kayak is where is as far as I get into. But, if we were looking at navigating, that's sort of where I always go to is, to the ocean. Where are we actually going? And yes, if you're wanting to get from this point to this point and you need to navigate it out from that perspective, that's fine. But I sort of feel that if we only stick to that one line, what else are we missing out on? Like I've just said yes to reviewing a book. I don't know where that will lead to. It's not necessarily going to lead to anything, but I just said yes because it's something that I haven't done before. And I might love it. I might become a book reviewer. I don't know. I probably won't. But, I think it's just opening it up a little bit more. And I think that also then comes down to, what you define as successful as well. And I think for me, I said it, like I have really grappled when I left that agency that I really thought that I would be with for the rest of my career. And it hurt that I was grappling with it. And I still grapple with it a little bit in terms of I still want that career, but I also want to be at home. And that in terms of what I define as successful, it's really where do I want to put my energy? And right now my energy, this is where I want to place it. I want to be writing more, and I also want to be there for my family as well. And that's where I suppose I define that success as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably the most important thing that you can do is actually have that definition of what that means, and as you very importantly said there, what it means to you, not some other definitions, friends, family, societal definition, but your definition. What are the things that are important to you? What are your priorities at this point in time? Because I think that's the other thing that different seasons of life, different seasons of careers, different priorities at different points in time. But I think where people sometimes get into tricky waters is when they haven't kind of clearly defined that for themselves. And then I think that's sometimes where those feelings of resentment or some of those more negative feelings can come from, when you feel like, and I say this because I have done it, when you feel like you're doing something that you don't really want to be doing, but you're just kind of forcing it through. Absolutely. And as you said, it's they're not always easy decisions to make, and they're not always comfortable. And sometimes you do really have to kind of grapple with them. But yeah, I think so important for the individual to kind of set that for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think as a society, we're probably getting better. We're getting more flexible, right? With general as a whole. And I think we're slowly getting better at that definition of success. I think as individuals, that's probably where a lot of that work still needs to be done. And that, they're recognizing that, as you said, it's okay that person A doesn't want that, but person B does want it. But, person B might want it in 2 years' time or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think it's really about, happiness in terms of where that energy, where you place your energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to your point earlier about, I think it was, you said when you came back after your first child and went part-time, but had kind of floated the idea of job share, and would that be a possibility? And it's one of those things that I've always thought, if you could make it work, it just seems like the kind of obvious solution, but so rarely do you see it happen. Yeah. And I get logistically, there probably needs to be some good kind of system and process around that, but it just seems like a real kind of win-win solution. And I think it's such a shame that, more broadly, we haven't kind of figured that out yet.
Yeah, and it's been a big, I suppose a big disappointment of mine in terms of the number of jobs out there that don't have that flex, like even still. And, or it could be 4.5 day a week job and that's classified as part-time. Or I've had another conversation. Sure, we're flexible. If your kid's getting an award at assembly, you can go and then come back to the office. I'm like, well, that's not really flexible. And rightly or wrongly, you probably get more out of me being at home because I'm in my office and I'm, focused. And but it is a big disappointing factor a lot of the times. And even, there's that thing about some people say, well, you would still go for a job that's full-time and then you ask for it to be reduced back. And then there's the other part that says, well, don't do that at all. So it's a challenge. It is really a challenge. I think there's a huge opportunity for organisations to really look at that part-timer, because there's people that you're missing that could actually be a perfect one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think certainly all the work from home and the flexibility stuff, it is definitely helping, but there is still that kind of, what is it? I don't know, just that mental shift to kind of output and result rather than time spent, that they are not the same. They are not the same thing. And going back to your earlier point as well of being in a part-time role, but actually doing full-time hours. I have heard so many people say that. And to be, it's just not fair,
No,
but it kind of happens over again that the person doing it wants to contribute. And I've heard a lot of people saying, well, I just kind of feel lucky that I got a part-time role, so I do the extra, which it's not actually fair, and of course there's going to be times here and there where you go above and beyond. Totally, that's a different scenario. But if every week you're doing an extra day, an extra 2 days, but not being paid for that, it's actually just not fair.
Yeah. And, I've got 2 comments on that. And one of them is that many years ago when I was part-time for an agency and I was tasked with a special project, so something completely different to the client work, and loved doing it and was thrilled at the opportunity. And I got the first stage of that done very quickly. And I will never forget somebody saying in senior management, who was quite surprised that it had already been done, give a part-timer a job and they'll do it really quickly. And I just went, that's not really the way that this should work. Yes, it meant that I had to do things after hours because of without going into it, it was the type of project it was, but I needed to get it done by a certain date. But that's not right. It's not the sort of language that I'd like to hear. But
it's not quick, it's efficient. Like they're 2 different things.
Right. Yeah, I don't go out for 3 coffees at the local cafe every day. And, but the other thing on that is, yes, it's unfair for organisations in terms of even seeing that people are still working longer hours than what they're being paid from a part-time capacity. But I think the other thing, if I'm being really honest, is that, as an individual, you need to also not work those hours. So there is part of that where you're also responsible for that. And I know that for me, I could have not worked those hours. I did say that I'm over at capacity, but I could have just stopped. And that probably would have led to other things, but I could have just stopped. Or not even not that I pretended I didn't have the children, but it was more, I still had this career that I desperately wanted to achieve, get to my end goal. So I'll do anything to do it. And I think that in itself probably, that doesn't help either. So there's some responsibility, I think, there for me anyway, in my case as well.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? Like it's almost like 2 things can't be true at the same time. You can want to be there for your family and have that as your ultimate priority, and also care about your job and want to have a fulfilling career. Like those 2 things can exist at the same time. And I'm sure for the vast majority of people do exist at the same time. But there's this weird narrative that, one has to be more important than the other. It's strange. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from, of that feeling of, well, if I want to be seen as taking my career seriously, then I can't say that actually I've actually got a priority that's more important, which is kind of ridiculous, because surely that's most people's priority is their family. It's a pretty rare person that's going to say, I will put my career above everything. They might have a lot of outward success, but they might be quite miserable if that's what they do. But it's a weird narrative, isn't it, that we've somehow found ourselves in, and I think still find ourselves in. Like I said, the 2 can't be true at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, some of the freelancers that I've spoken with, it's that same story all over again, is that I still want to be there, and not necessarily even set my own hours, but I just, that flexibility in terms of going, okay, well, a couple of days ago I was at athletics day the whole day, and I chose to be there because I wanted to be there, and not every parent wants to be there, and some would think that's completely boring. But for me, at this stage, I wanted to be there, and having that flex that I could do that and just shift, what I was doing around a little bit so I could be there. But I think it's a common occurrence, or it's that common theme, that I'm freelancing because, there's not that employed position out there that can give me this flexibility or the lifestyle that I want.
Mm. And also, I'd imagine you touched on it before, but the diversity of work that you're doing, it would be a pretty rare role that would have that diversity of what you can actually be involved in.
Yeah, very
and I'd
true.
imagine a big part of what you're enjoying about it, that you get to do so many different things, and you're not sort of narrowly boxed in.
Yeah, and I think even even an extension of that, I've been able to connect two of the organisations together that work in the health industry, and now they're collaborating. So I think
Well, that's great.
it's even sort of bigger than I suppose than my little role as such within those two organisations. And yeah, it is lovely. It's a lovely idea that I can bring a skill set into an organisation that hasn't had that, whether it's before or the capacity for it at the moment, and also that outsider's view. So when you're so ingrained in something, and the marketing manager, and I've said, oh, hey, have you thought about this? And it's not that my ideas are any better or anything. It's just that, oh, well, I think about it differently because I'm not in that zone every single day. That 5 days a week. So that's been a really great thing. And I think even with it was back in my sort of side hustling days, but I did a lot of work. Some of it was corporate, but I also did a lot of work in the tourism, sort of regional tourism area, and being able to help those businesses, particularly in the lockdowns here in Victoria. Like, that was a really tough time for regional Victoria. Whether it was just updating some web copy for them. So nothing that was strategic in terms of, I suppose, the level that I would be doing within a corporate space, but just updating web copy for them, or an incredible local restaurant in Echuca that was, of course, struggling with lockdown, and being able to help them with their social media. And it wasn't something, it was just something that they then didn't have to think about whilst they were still trying to make ends meet and make everything else work throughout that time as well. So I think I get to, suppose, help a little bit more in terms of perspective as well, and that's a good feeling with the clients that I'm working with as well.
Yeah, and also it's just thinking that point you made about the healthcare ones there. It's almost building a kind of sense of community as well.
Yeah,
and I think that is something that's really nice as a freelancer, I can never say that word, solopreneur, something like that. You know what I mean? That it can start to feel a bit lonely sometimes, but if you are kind of building that community at the same time. I've spoken to a lot of people recently, some on the podcast, some not, around that, and how they sort of manage that, and everyone, myself included, has kind of said having that sense of community and kind of building, that's actually been a really big, important part of the process for them.
Yeah. And I think quite a big community out there. I think it's just putting yourself out there and asking. And if you look on LinkedIn a while ago, I put the call out and said, hey, like, who's out there who's willing to have a chat, have a coffee. And there's I'm now part of groups that sort of do that on a monthly basis. There's a conference I'm heading to in Sydney. Like, there's a whole lot of different networking opportunities out there. And I know that the word networking, has that negative connotation attached to it, but there are definitely, opportunities out there, so that we're not feeling so lonely as
it's can be. It's so true, isn't it? I say this a lot to the people that I work with, and very much kind of espouse the benefits of networking. But I agree with you, people don't like the word, and I completely understand why. And I sort of tend to think of it as having conversations and building relationships, and that's something that far more people feel comfortable doing than the idea of kind of quote unquote networking, which feels a bit 100 strangers in a room and a business card, and it's all a bit kind of icky.
I don't have those business cards
no
anymore.
Me neither. And it's not, and that type of activity is something that I personally wouldn't feel particularly comfortable doing, but having conversations, asking questions, building relationships. Like, yeah, absolutely. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is the kind of the act of putting yourself out there. And that's the bit that a lot of people still feel a little bit uncomfortable with, which I also get. I have days like that too, where perhaps I'm reaching out to someone for the first time and, I have the internal voice going, don't do it. What are they going to think?
Yeah. And
How,
it is, and I think it's that taking that leap, isn't it, that we kind of talked about at the beginning. It's taking that step. And, I was actually on the phone before this and for a potential article or interviewing somebody. And she said, oh, when we catch up, I've got all of these other contacts. Let me give them to you. So you never know where things are going to go. And I think it is taking that leap and trusting yourself. And, if you stuff up at a networking thing and you, I don't know, it's okay. Like life goes on. It's not make or break.
No, exactly. And I think two things there. One, and again, I often say this to people, of what's actually the worst thing that can happen. Like if that's where your brain is going and you're scared of it, what is actually the worst thing that can happen? And it's probably that they don't respond to you. Like, is that bad? So you sent someone a really nice message and for reasons unbeknown to you, they didn't respond to you. Is that bad? Well, no, it's not actually. And I think just kind of taking some of that, fear away from it. And the other thing which she said, which I also think is completely true, is the vast majority of people are more than happy to help you. Like you said, the person you spoke to that said, oh, I've got all these other contacts, let me share them with you. Most people want to help. And that's been my experience. And also the other thing that I think is a useful perspective on it is to kind of put yourself in their shoes. Like if someone sent you that message, obviously assuming you've written a nice message and all that kind of stuff, what would you say? You'd be flattered and you'd go, oh, that's lovely. Yes, actually, let's do that. Let's have a quick chat over Zoom or a coffee or whatever it might be. I think it's just kind of peeling away that sort of fear element. And I also think, as she said, getting away from that word kind of networking.
Naughty word.
No, need to think of a better word.
I just say coffee catch-ups. Let's just catch up. Coffee. Yeah.
It just feels a bit more casual, a bit more human, just a bit. I think maybe that's what it is. Networking just feels a bit forced and it feels a bit salesy and a bit fake, maybe, which I think if it's done well and with the right intention is everything that it shouldn't be. So maybe that's it. Coffee catch-up. I've held myself back long enough, Kelly. I'm now going to go full into travel because it is one of my favourite things to talk about. I know, quite impressed with myself. One of my favourite things to talk about and to do as well. And one of the things that I particularly love about your story is that you've got yourself in a position where you've managed to bring together two things that you love, not just one, but two. So massive credit to you for that. Yeah, tell me about it. How did it kind of come about? What have you been working on? Where have you been going?
I actually don't know when I first started doing it because I think I've always written in some capacity. So even within uni, there might have been an article here and there for something that I did for free because I just felt passionate about whatever the topic was, or an opinion piece or something like that. But I suppose the travel just started to really come, I suppose, as I started to travel more, and probably also more when I started traveling with the kids, to be honest. So I don't want to sort of pigeonhole myself into being like a family travel writer. I think there's more to it than that. But that's probably when I started to go, oh, there's education out there that we can also let our kids, experience that isn't in the classroom and so forth. So that's probably when I really started to go, okay, there might be something else out here. And I suppose to begin with, I just started pitching to publications. Didn't really know how to pitch, but just kept going. I've done a few courses. So I think probably not even just with travel writing, but just me as a whole. I've always loved the academic stuff. So, I've always done some type of course in the background, throughout my career. And so I've done a few writing courses. I've even sort of had, one-on-one consulting sessions. So where I pay a travel writer to look at pictures and so forth as well. I think I just slowly got probably a little bit better at what I was doing. And then once I did have a few publications that had published my work, it does make it a whole lot easier. So you're not just a nobody. And I think it's still hard. It's a really hard slog, particularly as a freelancer. I think I read somewhere that for every 10 pictures that you put out to an editor, you'll get a response for one back. So that doesn't necessarily mean a yes. It's just you actually get a response. So I can't remember where I read that stat from, but I'm probably a little bit better than that in terms of getting that response rate, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a yes. So particularly at the moment, we've just had, the strikes that went on last week with a lot of journalists and so forth. So, and we also know that there's a lot of redundancies. So there is a lot of feedback out there saying that we don't have the funding. We've used our commission and we've got a lot of stories already on file. We need to get through those first. So there are a lot, and that's a lot of writers saying that. So, I don't think it's just the editors writing back to me saying, sorry, we can't take yours. But look, I have had, some incredible success. And I think if I looked at when I finished up with my corporate role last year, if anyone had said that I would, have these travel pieces and then I would get the opportunities to go and travel for Mills and I'd be up in Queensland diving with manta ray and, all of that, I probably never would have actually believed it. And I've got a few extra trips coming up or travel for Mills coming up that I can't really talk about. But it's happening and it's exciting and it's a hard slog though. It's certainly not just contact an editor, say, hey, I want to write this piece, and then they say yes. So some of it I think is also to do with timing as well, if they're wanting to focus on something else. So it's also about, I suppose, trying to get into understanding what, if there's special editions. So if they have an Asian edition coming up, well, okay, what could I pitch for that particular edition and things like that. I'm also now connected with a number of groups within the travel industry as well. So I think, again, just getting connected, joining societies. There's a couple of groups where editors will actually say, hey, I'm after this type of piece. Anyone out there that can do it? So that's where I've had a couple of my successful stories as well. Yeah, again, I think it's just taking that leap and giving it a go, really.
Yeah. And putting yourself out there, it is very much from what you've said there. It is you. It is outreach as opposed to them coming to you. You've got to kind of put the hard yards in, and hopefully you get to a place one day where they are all coming to you.
Yeah, and I think if being honest, I've probably had two editors that have come to me and said, hey, can you write this? And one of them was about turning a cubby house into a chicken coop because, we've got backyard chickens. And so it's random, it could be random things. But for me, that's still quite exciting. There's always something that, that you can learn from that. But you definitely, it's if it's a freelancing role, it's definitely one that you need to be always putting yourself out there and probably also being really thick-skinned. Like it's hard to get knocked back. And then another knockback. I think I had 3 or 4 knockbacks last week in one day. And that's a hard day. But I'm not giving up. It's something that I really enjoy doing. And I don't necessarily know if I'll ever make a full-time living out of it or even a part-time living out of it. But, if there's any editors out there that want someone, but it's something that I'm going to continue to do because it's something that I enjoy.
You mentioned the knockbacks there and 3-4 in 1 week. How do you deal with that? Do you have, I don't know, something that you do or something that you tell yourself in your head? So like how do you deal with it?
I message my husband some words that I probably can't say here, and then he responds with also words that I can't say here. But just in terms of him feeling what I'm feeling. But it's frustrating. But I also think I'm allowed to feel frustrated and I'm human. And if I don't feel those feelings, what's that going to lead to? So yeah, it's a downer, and it might be just take the dog back out for another walk. Sorry dog, but let's hit the pavement again. And I just think it's okay to feel down. But a couple of days later, I'm back out pitching again, and for a different publication. And I think it's about if you've got a story that you really think is worthy, and just changing that angle a little bit depending upon the publication. So obviously I'm not going to pitch the same thing to a kids magazine versus a Melbourne-based publication. They're always going to be that slight difference in terms of what I'm pitching. So I don't know, just get back up, have your little sook, or I have my little sook and then I get back up again. Yeah. There's no real science or technique behind it. I think it's just having that belief that you can do it.
I totally agree. And the thing I actually really like about what you said there, which is something that I don't always do and can be guilty of, is when you said it's okay to feel frustrated and I'm allowed to feel frustrated. I thought, actually, that's a really good point, because I think, and that sort of idea of like hustle culture and just keep going, and you can't always do that. Like sometimes you have got to stop and go, do you know what? I'm actually really disappointed about this. Like I'm actually, that is just, slightly crushing. I'm disappointed. I'm just going to take a moment to feel that, not pretend that everything is sunshine and rainbows. And obviously if that goes on for too long, then that's a different issue. But to take that time and just go, this actually sucks, and I'm allowed to feel that way. Yeah.
And even last week, actually, I told the kids, so we picked them up from school, and how's your day? And I'm like, mine actually sucked today. Like I had a big day. And I think even that, I know we're not talking about parenting, but I think, I'm trying to also teach them it's okay. Like you can have days that just suck.
Yeah.
Then you get back up and you hit the ground running in the following day or whatever it may be. But it's okay. We're human.
Yeah, it's realistic, isn't it? I think there's this phrase of toxic positivity, and I think we've all experienced people that are like that, of just when they're like, oh, it's okay, like everything's great, sunshine and rainbows, nothing ever goes wrong, and it's just not real life. So I love that point, and I need to be reminded of that sometimes. So thank you. That was well timed. What's been your favourite travel adventure?
My favourite travel adventure. Oh, do you know what?
It's probably hard to pick one, but
it is hard to pick one. I really still think the basic, what I would say like a standard basic Aussie holiday is still, some of my favourites. We love Bright in Victoria, just heading up to, towards the high country and sitting down the river on donuts, blown up donuts with the kids. I think that's some of the, the core memory making stuff for the whole family. And then, of course, there are some of the more extravagant ones. So, Svalbard, which is the most northern settlement or permanent settlement in the world. So, was lucky enough to go there last year with the kids. So, I think just
very high on my list.
yes, go make it the bucket list. But even being in minus 14 degrees, but having the right gear on so you don't feel the cold. And it's cold, and seeing all of the wildlife up there, the walrus and so forth, was absolutely incredible. And probably just seeing a different way that people live, and they live in darkness for 4 months of the year, and it's incredible. So I would probably say Svalbard, another big one of mine.
Yeah, it's, I say, very, very high on my list. It's funny, I don't know how it came about. It's a few years ago. My husband bought this picture, which is essentially like a world map, but drawn world map. And some of the countries are named and some aren't. It's a very simple kind of almost black and white thing. And in pride of place, right at the top, is Svalbard. So for years we've been obsessed with this. We've got to go to Svalbard.
No, it's an absolutely incredible place. And even just walking around the settlement, and you've got to have a gun to go out of the. So because of the polar bears, so not to shoot them, of course, but it's an incredible place. And I suppose the other part, very close to my heart, would be Germany, because I went on exchange there as a teenager many years ago. Recently wrote an article about it actually for Sunday Life, but so we've been back there many times, and now with the kids as well, to see our German family over there. So nice. Germany's always on the list.
Yeah.
as well.
Were you in
Yeah.
Svalbard in summer or winter?
We were in, it's called, their season is called Sunny Winter. So we were there in May. So it was 24/7 daylight.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. When you saw that. It
Yeah,
seems quite
it
surreal.
snowed. It snowed while we were there. So yeah, still well, -14. So it's cold.
Yeah.
It's,
Did you get out on the water at all? Did you go around
yeah,
any? Yeah.
yeah. So we went out on just a small rib boat for walrus watching. So we got to see them on icebergs and on the ice. Wasn't actually an iceberg, the ice and then in the water. But even just gliding through the soft ice was incredible. The pancake ice is what they call it, but that was absolutely incredible to listen to it crack as you go through in the small boat. We also did dog sledding, of course, because you can't go there and not go sledding through the valley, which was just incredible. I thought my toes were literally going to freeze. That was the one day that I was cold. My toes were absolutely frozen. And we also hired a guide. So we hired a private guide because we had the kids, so we wouldn't have been able to keep up with any organised hiking tours. So we hired our own. And you, of course, as I said before, you have to be licensed, but you have to carry a license, firearm when you're out of the settlement because of polar bear danger. So yeah, so we hired a guide and went hiking kind of up in the hills, which was, it was incredible. Just the four of us and our guide. So
Super
the kids
cool.
got to ask all the questions that they wanted to, and they were able to have them answered.
Did they enjoy it? Did they like it?
They loved it, yeah. And again, I think it's just, kids can go anywhere. You just have to make sure that they're fed and they have to have the right clothes. So they weren't cold at all, minus the dog sledding at the end of it. That was quite. But besides that, they absolutely loved it. And then, of course, the Husky Cafe, which is where you go and can have your coffee or your hot chocolate, and you're surrounded by huskies. So we were there every day, and the kids just thrived in that cafe where they were just mates with all of the dogs in there for the day. So it was beautiful.
I think I'd be in there every day too, every morning. Go and say hi to the huskies, have a coffee.
Change them every day. So
did they? Okay.
Because they're just the neighbourhood dogs, essentially. They come in for their kind of play dates. So play dates with kids. So every day there were different ones. But there's some that it's there most of the days because they're the owner's dogs, but then you get the others that just
And are they working dogs? Are they actually no, they're just
no, none of them. So I think maybe a few of them might have used to be working dogs, but I think a lot of the working dogs go to the mainland or get homes with families after they've been working. I think these are literally just your neighbourhood, pets, so to speak.
Yeah, very cool. And so very high on the list.
Yeah.
Got to make it happen.
I know it's a very long way away, and it's hard. Oh, it's not so hard to get to, but it's a long way away.
Yeah, we have to say this because obviously my family are in the UK, and we tend to go back once a year to see them, which obviously I want to do, and it's important, but that part's not really a holiday. So it's then how do you kind of fit things around it, and doing that feels like it would be a bit of a longer trip. So it's just kind of finding the time, but got to do it.
Do it. Live once. Like just jump into freelancing. You just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Become a travel writer.
See where it takes you. Just do it.
How do I combine career coaching and travel? This is my new question. Final question, Kellie. It's always the final question here. Is there something that you know now that you wish you knew then?
I think there's probably a couple. That the boss that I had when I worked in the industry-based learning through uni, where he, said he wouldn't employ anyone without a writing degree, I think that really threw me. And I often think back not in a mean way, but go, well, actually I made it. And yes, I did a master's in writing. So I'm aware that I have done that since, but that was sort of creative writing. It was different. So I often think back and go, I wish I hadn't been so naive and just had taken that on as a personal comment, which I think looking back, it was probably just an overarching discussion about, how he wants to manage his department. So probably, that just not paying as much attention. And then I think the other one is just knowing it's actually okay to want to change. You don't have to stick to something if it's now no longer suited to you for whatever reason. And that's okay. Just as long as you're moving forward, you may not know the path that you're taking, but yeah, as long as you're moving forward, just say yes and just give it a go. Give it a go. I think give it a go is probably the other thing I wish I knew a bit younger.
Yeah, I thought that before, actually, when you were talking about just saying yes. I think that's such an important kind of mindset to take on. And I think often it's the thing that stands out, the sort of common thread across people who have been successful in whatever way they define success. It is those people who go, yeah, I'm going to do that. No idea how I'm going to do it. I will figure it out, but I'm going to say yes, and I am going to go off down that path. And I think that, that sort of mindset is, it actually takes you a really long way, because there's a lot of people in that scenario that wouldn't say yes and would say, oh no, I don't know how to do that. No, I'm just going to stay where I am. And if you feel comfortable to kind of push yourself and take on that kind of stuff, I think over time it has a compounding effect, and you can find yourself in places that you perhaps never would have imagined, because as she said, the path to get there wasn't linear. So,
And I think probably just the other point, and I know it's not really about your final question, but just that in terms of moving forward, that continued learning. So, yes, you've done a university degree, but are there other opportunities within an organization? Or, I've done a lot of short courses over my time, again, just because I'm interested in something and I want to learn more. And I think there's always something to learn that you can then take back into, whether it's your organization or the job that you have, or the job that you're wanting to, your next career move or whatever it may be. And, I've done a postgrad in management since. Like, there's a whole lot of things that I think, am I using that right now? Probably not. But next year or in 5 years' time, I'm back in a corporate role or something, then that may actually be, come to fruition again in terms of those skill sets. And one day I'll do a PhD, and I've always said I want to do it in a particular topic. And again, even that isn't linked to anything to do with my career. It's just a topic I'm quite passionate about, or I'll be very interested in researching. And that's okay. Again, I don't think that success has to be based on where you are in the ladder or the income that it's going to generate for you. I think, again, it's that happy factor, like what's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What's the PhD topic?
Oh, so I'd like to do it on the world wars and propaganda in terms of advertising.
Interesting.
I don't want to share the whole thing in case someone steals it.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Essentially, and the whole propaganda thing, it fascinates me, just in terms of how people tick and how you get people to change perceptions. And well,
it's going right back to the beginning, isn't it, of the psychology that you were interested in the beginning. Yeah,
absolutely. And even my account management days, where products are positioned on shelf, and why people purchase from this one, not this one, or why we put it down the bottom rather than the middle one. So it's all that human psyche of, that buyer behavior fascinates me. And I work as a sessional academic at a university even now. That's something I didn't mention I do, but I do as well, and that's in branding and in marketing as well. So all of that, it all links in. So
very cool. Thank you, Kellie. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience and your insights, and very cool. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually said to my kids this morning, because we, as you sit around having breakfast and you say, what are you going to do today at school? And I said, I'm actually going to be a guest on a podcast, and I've been a guest on travel podcasts before, but I said, I'm talking about my career journey. And my 9-year-old daughter said, are you just going to talk about your jobs and people are going to listen? So I hope that your listeners see more value in listening to me rather than what my 9-year-old daughter thought.
Bless her. How to be humbled instantly by one's child.
No, I don't think she clearly doesn't know that there are career podcasts out there, because she's not quite there yet. But her facial expressions just showed it all. She had no idea why someone would listen to that. So
I love it.
A few listeners at least that see value in it.
Absolutely.